All right. Hi, everybody. I am Jon Taylor. I'm a clinical social worker in Salt Lake City, Utah. And my primary focus is on folks who struggle with addiction, their marriages, and the trauma that's interwoven in both of those. So that's where this webinar comes from, and that's where I'm speaking from is how to start applying skills for changing your relationship from day one in recovery. Because there's in my opinion, there's no need to wait forever until it's the perfect opportunity to work on repairing a relationship or making your relationship better. So I've got a question up here, and I would like to invite you all to put your responses in the chat. Because I want to discuss some of these ways that we know that there's emotional closeness, because that's our topic today. We've been going through different areas where there's disconnect, where there can tend to be disconnect in relationships, where things can get off the rails, and this is one of them. And this is one of them where I think it's a lot easier to know when we're off than we're on, when there's not emotional connection versus when there is. So that's why I want some brainstorms around how do I know when there is emotional connection, because it really helps to know what target you're shooting for, so that you and your partner, anyone that you're in a relationship with, we kind of know what that sweet spot is, and we can work collaboratively to go towards that. Um, so I think for obvious reasons, emotional connection plays a really big role in the amount of connection and the amount of closeness we feel in a relationship. This is essentially at like the bare bones level. This is how humans feel either in a relationship or out of a relationship, inside of a relationship or outside of a relationship. Um, because this emotional connection thing, this is like what's the statistic? Like 95% of communication is nonverbal. This is the 95% of what we're communicating. And the feeling that we're left with, the emotion that we're left with after communicating our desire for closeness and all that through our behavior, is whether or not we feel positively about our relationship or whether we feel like something's lacking, whether we feel safe or whether we don't. One of the questions to ask when you feel emotionally disconnected in a relationship is, has it always felt this way in this relationship? For example, um, I think back to a friendship that I had through like junior high and high school, my very best friend. Um, as I look back on that relationship now, it was still a really good relationship and still a lot of things that I really value, a lot of connections and experiences I really value in that relationship. But it wasn't an emotionally close relationship. It was close because we had similar interests and we had the same group of friends. We liked to do the same things. But as far as him knowing my internal world and me knowing his internal world, we just didn't do that. So if I were to look at that relationship and say, I don't feel close in this relationship, if I look back and say it's always been this way, I can identify like we don't talk to each other about our feelings. I can identify I don't know what his fears are, outside of uh, hanging out on weekends with a large group of friends. There's not much else we do that builds a bond between just the two of us. The other question to ask yourself is, that it hasn't always been this way. Did this start somewhere? If there's a feeling that this emotional disconnection started somewhere, then there's some really specific repair action that needs to be taken before we can build emotional closeness again. So as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about my sweet fluffy dog. I have a standard poodle, and she's fluffy right now because she just went to the groomer, so she's like a pom pom, but like a 70-pound pom pom. And from the very beginning in getting her, I knew that like me spending time with her and us exercising together and that kind of stuff, that was going to be important in our bond and important in her training. It was going to make her a good dog. So a few weeks ago, I was a little bit under the weather, really busy with work, really busy with home projects. And I started to notice that when I walked in the door at night, Luna is the name of the dog, like she was not running out to greet me. And our usual thing is like she was the first one to greet me at the door. And there was like 10 minutes of me bending down and her paws on my shoulder and she's licking my head and I'm hugging her. And it's this big like, hello, how are you? I've really missed you. for like 5 or 10 minutes every night, because it's this like, we've got this bond and I'm her person and I'm back now. So I noticed that this wasn't happening, and I was like, and I go to my wife and I said, is Luna home? And she's like, well, of course she's home. And I was like, where is she? And she's like, I don't know. So I go in my room and Luna's like laying on the bed, and she kind of looks at me like, oh yeah, you're back. I'm not going to get up. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And I continued to think about it, and I was like, I haven't been on a run with her in like a week, and that's like our time. And so the very next morning, I made it a priority. I made sure I got up in enough time. I got her up, and she was a little like, normally when she sees me putting on my running clothes, she's like uncontained, but she was kind of like, yeah, whatever. And it took like 3 or 4 times of us getting into our running routine again. And then I also, like, I made sure that I found her when I got home, and I would pet her a lot. When I would watch TV, I'd pull her up on the couch by me. Like, I made sure that we had this bonding thing going on again. And sure enough, in less than a week's time, like, I was getting greeted at the door and she was jumping on me, and like, we've got to have our 5 or 10 minutes of hello. If we know that it started somewhere, that feeling of emotional disconnection or that feeling of emotional distance, we have some repair work to do. And in a like a coupleship, in a marriage, that requires being able to talk through and process what happened, what went wrong. So in couples where addiction is something that's being dealt with, this is often something that has to happen in order to bridge that emotional gap. Is we might need accountability on the part of the addicted partner. We might need a disclosure on the part of the addicted partner. We might need that addicted partner to be in a place where they can talk responsibly about their actions and their feelings, and for their spouse as well, before we can really heal that emotional rupture. This requires us to do some deep processing in order to close the gap. So long conversation, and I would recommend for couples in recovery that those conversations happen in a qualified therapist's office to begin with, because there's so many places that we can get hung up in the pursuit of emotional connection, not recognizing the wounds that we might be carrying. So the kind of connection that we have too, it's not an accident that it happens. It's usually really specific to what our needs are. So like, my dog is not really a cuddly dog. So when I force that on her, when we have been running enough, she really hates it. I know other dogs, she has my Luna's best friend, Meg. It's like they're children. Meg is an attention hound. Like, if I stop and spend time with Meg, she's on her back indefinitely and I'm scratching her belly. And that really speaks to her. Humans are the same way. There's really specific ways that connect with us and are emotionally meaningful to us. And it's important to know what those are for you, because in any kind of relationship, whether it's with your partner, your children, your dog, your coworkers, your boss, whoever, when you can communicate to me, hey, this is what's meaningful, it's an invitation into connection. It's an invitation into building a stronger relationship. Sometimes we may have a personal history that makes emotional connection with anybody else scary for us. And so if that's the case, if you can look to those questions, has it always felt this way? Is there something specific? And then you tie into your own fear. I've always been terrified to be connected to people. That might be a place that you want to do some work. Again, a qualified therapist is a really good place to start. Being able to resolve some of that history that has us afraid of connection. If we've had inconsistent parents or there's been abuse, connection can be a scary thing. So I want to check in. I'm going to stop the share here. I want to check in with the chat. I'd ask the question, how can you tell when you're emotionally close to somebody? And this person put in safety. There's actual interest both ways. So that would be a behavioral indicator. There's this give and take when we talk to each other, mutual interest in developing the relationship. There's an interest in the other person. They look at you when they talk to you and you do the same. I think those are really, really good indicators of emotional closeness. And notice in here too, all of these except for safety, these are performable. So if I want to develop some emotional closeness with my partner, I might practice eye contact. If I want to develop some emotional closeness with my partner, I might practice making sure that our conversations are give and take. So I called you up and I vented about my horrible day. And then I said, enough about me, what's going on with you? Like, that can develop some emotional closeness. There's there's enough of a balance between the needs and the attention in the relationship. There was one more question I wanted to ask, and this may be more of a homework item, because I would say the majority of the clients that I work with, when I say, what do you need in order to feel emotionally close to somebody, I get this look. And I think a lot of us have gone through a lot of our life not even considering, what do I need? We may be really attuned to other relationships, and what does this person need from me? So the question that I would leave you with, and maybe something to think about and explore a little bit more, is how do you learn what you need to know, or how do you learn what it is that is emotionally connecting for you? How do you figure that out? Brainstorm some ideas, and then give yourself an opportunity to maybe practice some of those, practice some of that self-discovery. Because this is definitely a part of relationships. I don't think there's any part of relationships where mind reading works well. This is a part of any relationship where mind reading is definitely not going to work well. If you want an emotional connection with somebody, I think that requires you to be able to start with, hey, this is where you can meet me. This is what's meaningful to me emotionally. This is how I feel connected emotionally. So if you don't know exactly what that is for you now, start discovering that. Find some ways that you can figure out what does have meaning for you, and maybe even experiment with some of that.
I was thinking and I read this a longer time ago, and it was the languages of love or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
that was really helpful because, I've got people that I'm connected to that, like if I bring them a gift, that's a really big thing. For me, that's less. Like if you do something for me, like, like my husband unloading the dishwasher is, like, because I normally just do that. So that's a big deal to me. That's, a language of love to me that works, like he doesn't have to buy
Mm-hmm.
me stuff, but I think, when you were saying figure it out, I was like, that can be daunting to even figure out. But, I thought,
Yep.
that was the resource that came to my mind of like, where am I and what is theirs? Because obviously if we're talking on different languages, I need to learn to bring a gift to somebody who needs a gift, and they need to just
Mm-hmm.
not bother bringing the gift, just show up and do.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that kind of stuff is really helpful. I was cracking up when you're dissed by your dog, so it's like, talk to the paw, I don't even
Right.
care. So yeah, that's funny. But like I was I thought that was really a very good thing to do, and going, what changed,
Mm-hmm.
that you were like that you thought to like think about this with the dog and not just go, well, the dog just is going to lay on the bed now, so and then practice it. I thought that was brilliant. But it was also one of those things where I was like, okay, it immediately came to mind. There's a couple of relationships. One of them, like I really was trying to foster and things. And then it was a safety issue. It was, this
Mm-hmm.
person was connected to somebody that like, I just can't be connected to. And they got to choose, and it was all fine. Mostly it was all fine, but they chose to be close to this other person. So then I knew that my safety was in jeopardy. So like I could only be tangentially connected with them because it wouldn't have been
Mm-hmm.
safe for me. So it's interesting that those kind of relationships came to mind, of ones where, like I would have liked to have engaged more, but it was clear that, there wasn't going to be the give and take and the safety, present to be able to do that. So understanding that, like, not all of my emotional relationships are going to be really close ones. I'm going to have all these people on different levels and layers, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Probably only have the bandwidth to, maintain X number of, closer relationships too. But then I was thinking about, last month, my girlfriend came, and we were college roommates, so a long time ago. And, like we can pick up right where, we were. And so we have that emotional closeness, even if we don't see each other for a little bit, like we can talk about anything. And I know if I picked up the phone right now and called her, it's the same. And so, so it's just fascinating to me how, how that works. But I think we've also developed, I mean, like we've made sure that those relationships have been safe, and we've been supportive of each other. So, but interesting.
Yeah. Any questions about either emotional closeness or anything recovery related in general?
Or relationship related. So So I've
We
shared
can talk
before,
about
but we've got some
anything.
new people. Jon does great work with couples in recovery. He does disclosure, so that's, you know, a great topic. He works with mother enmeshed men, you know, and couples that are, I'll say, struggling with, you know, an over attachment to a parent. So if you have questions on any of those aspects, ask, please. So typically we got a question. How do I implement the emotional connection with my SA husband if I don't feel safe yet?
Yeah, that would be one of those situations. And I think in a lot of SA couples early on in recovery, it's hard to get the emotional connection because there's that big betrayal and that big rupture. So there's a couple places to work that. I think diving right into the relationship and saying, hey, we're distant and we need to fix that. Um, to me, that can almost be like a bypass of the work that we have to do to rebuild trust, to determine whether or not we actually are committed to the relationship. I think that's a question for a lot of partners based on my addicted partner's behavior. Are they actually committed to the relationship? That's really important for that to actually happen, before we move into that emotional connection. So some things that you might do is you stay really connected with what it takes to be, for you to feel emotionally connected in a relationship. Let's say that up until the day of discovery or disclosure, your addicted spouse was the person that you told everything to. And now you feel like, do I even know this person? So it might be important for you to be plugged into another person, maybe someone in recovery, maybe a friend, maybe a sibling that you're close to, a clergy member, something like that. I still have somebody that I can tell everything to, because that's a really important way to get my emotional needs met. Um, you know, it may be, and I see this in a lot of spouses that I work with, the day of discovery or the day of disclosure, the whole world turns upside down. And I may have had some health routines, like maybe around eating, exercise, maybe had some socialization routines, time with friends. And those are usually the first things that go out the window. They get really, really disrupted, around discovery or disclosure. And it's not so much about forcing ourselves back into those, but finding our way back to our grounding, finding our way back to where we feel calm, we feel peaceful, we feel helpful. Those are the kind of things that, once you've taken care of kind of the basics of what it takes for you to survive and to feel safe, then you can be open to things like compassion and connection. So really kind of pulling back and making sure the self-care is working for you. Because I have seen, I've worked with couples where, like the partner in the case of this question, the partner has kind of done this white knuckle death grip on the relationship or on holding on until their partner's ready to connect. And then when their partner's ready to connect, this person has no bandwidth for any kind of compassion or love or any of that, because they have not been taking care of themselves along the way. Um, and it's really frustrating for them, and it's really frustrating for their addicted partner when we're finally in a place where some bonding can happen. We're not ready for it. So I would say keep tuning into those emotional needs you have, being able to discover those, and work on as many of those needs as possible being met as part of your recovery, with or without your spouse. Because there will come a day where you make that decision. Yes, I want you to come back into this space and help me with these needs, or no, it's time for us to part ways. And that decision is going to be, you're going to feel most settled about it when you know that you're really solid as an individual, if that makes sense. Where I've stayed connected with me throughout this. And so the decision that I'm making is actually about me. It's not my fear talking. It's not my mother talking. It's not my group talking. It's really me.
Yeah, that's it's difficult, but yeah, that's great. We talk on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com. We want to have all these supportive resources for you. So the betrayed partner resources and things like that, so you can get that support in other
Mm-hmm.
places, so that you can have more bandwidth as you go too. But it's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? You have an expert to ask, please. It's free. So, so we talked a little bit about disclosure. I'll ask this because this comes up often. So when you're, when you're working with a couple for disclosure, you know, what is the prep work and what is the goal?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The prep work all centers around the goal, and the goal is to have a truth sharing ritual, because relationships are actually built on truth. And then we have something like trust and safety coming above truth. We can't have real trust and safety unless there's the truth. So that's the whole goal, is to get the truth out there. The truth does not come out defensively. The truth does not provide a solid foundation when it's coerced, when an arm's twisted, or when it has to be picked apart. So preparation for the addict or the disclosing partner in that is to work to get to a point where they can provide I have my clients actually write out a document, like a letter. They can provide a document where they detail this is what my addiction has included. These are the ways that I betrayed you. And it's not just about getting all the secrets out. It's also about answering the partner's very specific questions and concerns. So the goal for the addict or the disclosing partner is to have a document that recounts their behavior in responsible language. And we want to get it down to just the facts. So I work with a lot of addicts around, like, they'll put down the fact and then they'll say, but I did this because I was thinking this at the time, or this is what was going on. And that's not just the facts. It's going to be up to your partner to determine what those facts mean for her, and what she wants to do with those. This isn't a PR letter. It's not like, I'm going to tell you what I did, but then I'm going to tell you why it wasn't a big deal or why I'm still a good guy. It's that opportunity to stand in the truth and to let the truth be a foundation of the relationship. For partners, a lot of the preparation is getting very clear on what they want to know and why they want to know it. A lot of the preparation is learning how to come back to themselves, their body, to establish some safety, because it's often the case when I facilitate a disclosure that the partner who's hearing it is very hurt by what she hears, or he hears, because they should be. What's being disclosed is hurtful stuff. So their preparation is making sure that when they're in that disclosure room with myself and their therapist, if I'm working with the addict, um, with the two therapists, that what's being said can be processed as much as possible real time. Because the way that the information came out before, it was piecemeal. It was when we were both in crisis and we were both emotionally elevated. And we know that no kind of learning or integration happens with that. And that's really what we want to see happen in disclosure, is that this information can actually start to be integrated and it can start to be processed. And then both parties can really make a decision about what they need from their relationship going forward. So the secondary goal of disclosure is to provide a really strong foundation that repair of a relationship can start on. It really provides an opportunity for the couple to get practice in telling the truth, even if the truth is going to be hard to hear, it's going to be hurtful. Being honest in our emotional and responsible in our emotional reactions, and then being able to respond with empathy and understanding rather than defensiveness. So there's the disclosures I facilitate, there's 3 parts that focus on those things. And it's really about, it's almost like, if Kung Fu is living life and Tai Chi is practice, this is like the Tai Chi of rebuilding a relationship. We really slow the process down. We really get embodied with it. And we make sure that we have a working process going forward, because guess what, even post-disclosure, there's going to be times where you need to tell the truth to each other, even though it's going to be hard, where you may want to explode all over the place, but giving an honest, responsible emotional response is going to be most helpful. And empathy is always needed. And so that's the skill that we're really equipping couples with in the disclosure process.
Great information. I think it's one of those very challenging points where partners going, I deserve to know now. Yeah, you deserve, but we also want to make sure we have this set up for you in the most optimal way, so that it can be, like, because you said there's going to be hurtful, hard things to hear. So we want to have this prepared, so that it's in the easiest way for you to hear it, but that you get what you need from it. And also, addicts forget, like they have no clue what they're, it's like you ask them a question and they could say no. And then later, if you're picking through it as a therapist, you're digging in and you go, oh, wait, yes, so I think, getting that complete history. So it isn't like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you this. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that. So, I always want it to be in the most optimal way for a couple, whether they stay together or not, that gets prepared. So we've got some questions. In recovery for 10 months with porn addict husband, why doesn't he think it would bother me to watch movies, shows with nudity and sex scenes? I find it hurtful that he would need to ask if he could watch these shows.
Yeah, my initial response is, I don't know. I actually think that I can hear the pain in that question, and I definitely understand where you're coming from. It's also a really good question. And that might be something, if you're in some couples therapy, that might be a good question to bring, like, help me understand why you think that I would be okay with this. Because I feel like I've been really clear on how I've been hurt and what those triggers are, and really check for that understanding. I think it's very easy both ways, for both someone who struggles with an addiction and someone who's been betrayed, to assume that our partner has a working model of us inside of them. So, I think that's something that definitely demands more exploration. It could be as a lack of understanding. It could be as likely, and I'd say it's probably more likely this. It's one of the hallmarks of addiction is I'm really tuned into myself, and I don't really see myself in the context of my external world. I see myself in the context of me. And so being able to ask these kind of questions and have these kind of hard conversations, that's a really, I think, important part of recovery for couples, is because for the addicted partner, it kind of pushes them into this, like, okay, you are in a relationship with another person and you do need to have some awareness and you need to be able to take on some of that understanding. But yeah, I would start with asking him the question, and ask it when you're in a place where you could listen to the response. You may want to ask it in a way that says, hey, I want to discuss this with you in a way that will actually be useful. So you might give them the question in writing first and say, I want you to prepare to talk to me about this because I'd really like to know what's going on for you. Because you may be missing some information and maybe making an assumption about your partner's level of care for you or not. I know Dr. Rob has talked in the past about what a difference it made in his relationship for an ADD diagnosis. And he discovered all these things that my partner was doing where I thought he just wasn't considering, he didn't hate me. He actually, like, he was in a million different other places. And once there was an ADD diagnosis and that was medicated, I was like, oh, you do care about me. And there's this important piece of missing information. So I would say ask the question and see where that goes.
I had two thoughts on it. One was the ASAM, American Society of Addiction Medicine, has a definition of addiction, and part of it is diminished recognition of significant problems with one's behavior and interpersonal relationships. So that was the first thing I thought of. And then the second was, I'm kind of surprised that watching movies with nudity and sex scenes wouldn't be an inner circle behavior,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm kind of wondering about his sobriety plan. 10 months is great, but it's still pretty early in the process. So I think I think I would love, I think having the conversation with him, but
There's also another layer to me that really stands out. Do you want to be the person in that position that gives him permission to do things or not? And that might be more of the issue here. And it's not that your stance should be like, oh, I don't care, do whatever you want, but kind of that, like, there's a piece that I see for a lot of the addicts I work with early in recovery, that they want to get recovery, but they don't want to take responsibility for it. And this is part of it, is I have to make choices about what I'm going to do with my attention and my time. And those choices either help me in recovery or they don't. And anytime I try to get somebody else to make that choice for me, I'm not in control of my recovery. So that to me is really sticking out too, that he would ask, can I watch this? I think there really needs to be an internal compass point.
Or with a sponsor, like
Right.
what does your sponsor think? Is that a great idea at this point in recovery? And for me, one of the things I always have to measure things by is, you know, like, I've shared I struggle with an eating disorder. So if I'm having a piece of cake, I have to make sure like I'm having a piece of cake and I'm not got all the baggage around it and all of this kind of stuff. So can I have the piece of cake? Yes, but only if my mindset is in the right spot for it. Otherwise,
Mhm.
like I got this head stuff that goes on. So, what is it he's getting out of watching those scenes? There's lots of stuff to watch that doesn't have that stuff. And so there's other choices. And I think, the Out of the Doghouse book, I've said that before, but Dr. Rao's book, Out of the Doghouse, it talks about rebuilding trust,
Mhm.
and it would, if it was nothing more than this bothers me to watch this, or have you watch this, or I don't want to be sitting here with you watching while you're watching it, and all I'm thinking about is what you're doing and what you're thinking and about the porn and all of this kind of stuff, then that's not good for our relationship. And so it's like, going back to whose responsibility is it? It's his. Can he
Yep.
make different choices? Yes. Is he early in recovery? Yes. But he's making progress. So there is hope, but I think, definitely have the conversation, even if it's a written question, want to talk about it. Um, that would be great. So there's one in the chat. If my husband has never emotionally or never been emotionally open during the 20 years before my acting out, which went on for a year when I was forced to face a decade of trauma, what is the likelihood probability that he can learn to do so in light of my actions, provided of course that he wants to?
So what I hear in this question is it's really taking a look at like, can I play a role in helping this person be emotionally open who never has been before? I've seen miracles happen almost with like the same situation. I'm working with a couple right now where I'm consistently astounded at the husband who is the betrayed partner. I'm consistently astounded at how willing he is to work on emotion and connection with this person who's betrayed him so many times. But it's happening. I would say right now the thing to focus on is for you and your recovery. What is it that needs to happen? That if you want to help him get here, what do you need to do to give him the best shot possible to be able to repair this? Because if you've been together for 20 years and he hasn't been emotionally open, my guess is that started before your relationship. And he's going to need a really safe, consistent relationship if he wants to risk some openness again. And I'm not saying that to say all the pressure's on you, but simply to say when you make these changes, what you're doing is giving him a chance to be able to do that. It's no guarantee. It's essentially, I'm providing an opportunity. If you want to walk through this open door, it's open and it's here. But at the end of the day, he's the one that decides whether he wants to do that or not. And so that kind of takes it back to that old axiom that isn't always my favorite, but I think it applies here. You focusing on what's happening on your side of the street right now is what will help him or have the chance to help him down the road. So, making sure that you are taking good care of yourself, that you're involved in your recovery, getting responsible, getting accountable, all of that kind of stuff. Those will be some of the ways that you might help to set the table for a relationship that could help him work on this kind of stuff. And also, I see often with couples in recovery that these kind of dynamics may have preceded addiction. There may have been these issues before. And it's not to say that addiction is the only issue in the relationship. But what addiction does, it's like a tornado in the dining room. And we have to be able to clean up the dining room first to decide how we want to set the table next, and to look at how we've historically set the table and what changes we might want to make. I don't have like a percentage on the likelihood or the probability. I'll say I've seen it happen. But it really is a choice from both members of the relationship. And it's usually not a choice that they can make early on in recovery.
I was thinking too, it's like when you notice something that is a positive, what has worked well in my relationships is if I take note of that and go, I really appreciated this, or this, this helped me connect to you when you did this or whatever. So, because it may seem like a really little thing, to me, but on that person, it's like, this is like, I scaling a 20-foot wall, for them, it was a big big step. So, anything where you can see positive, I'd encourage you to, to positively reinforce it.
Yep.
So here's another one. How do I handle emotional connection with my husband consistently works to actively sabotage any need that I ask for, while at the same time he gets upset because I have been beat up emotionally so much that I am unable to meet his physical needs?
So this goes back, emotional connection is prerequisite on there not being an active rupture. So there's active ruptures all over the place here, and those have to be addressed first. So emotional connection isn't going to happen until the two of you are able to process the ruptures in trust. And whether or not that's a possibility for this relationship is another question. But yeah, and as I've gone through these skills, if you go back and watch the other videos, there's some that I've said, like, this is something you can start today, and there's no preparation work. Emotional connection, the preparation work is any open ruptures have to be processed and firmly on the road to healing before emotional connection can start to take place in that relationship. So if you have emotional needs, and you'd really love it if your spouse could be the one to meet those, but there's this rupture that is not repaired yet, that's where I would recommend, like, the support groups you're part of, the friendships you have. Those are places where you can get those emotional needs attended to, and you can experience their yeah. Yeah, but there's ruptures in this relationship that haven't been addressed, so that getting emotional connection isn't going to happen.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Abbas talked about, why would you want to be physically intimate with somebody? Why would you want to have sex with somebody you can't trust? Why would you
Yeah.
want to have sex with somebody that you are, that you are not emotionally attached to, other than if you're an addict and acting out and want to have disconnected sex? But so
Yeah.
it's one of those where his lack of emotional connection, creates a huge divide, or continues to enhance the huge divide. So then why would there be, physical connection? So what is your opinion of a couple in recovery using one of their individual therapists for their couple therapy? In my opinion, it should be someone who is on a neutral position.
In your case, I'll say you need another therapist for that. Because of this statement at the end, it needs to be someone in a neutral position. If either or both members of the coupleship are saying, like, my therapist is on your side and your therapist is on your side, neither of those therapists can do effective marriage work, because you guys are looking at this as, I have mine and you have yours, and it's adversarial already. So in your case, it needs to be a third therapist. I will say, in general, that's not always the case. I will say, whenever I work with more than one part of the system, that is an exception to the rule. And there's really, there's a very specific reason why I'm making an exception to the rule. But yeah, in general, I think especially early on in recovery, you need yours, he needs his, and your relationship needs its own. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And I say the same thing. The couples, the coupleship is the client. So if there are a handful of therapists that can navigate, those complex relationships. And I suspect, Jon, that if you're making that exception, you have very clear boundaries of how this is going to look for.
I have clear boundaries and I have extensive training. That's what I just spent this weekend doing, is getting more training in being able to work in the complexity of coupleships when there's serious issues going on. So it's not something that I, hung my shingle and said, oh, I think I can do this. I've really worked on a skill base to be able to conceptualize that treat that. There are very clear boundaries. So if you have an individual therapist offering that and you don't feel good about it, don't do it.
Yeah, I would say most aren't trained to do that.
Yeah.
And I only, I hear lots of the negative stories. I get that. So, but I hear about the, I don't trust this person, or, my addict has manipulated the therapist, and now the therapist is on, the addict side. And so yeah, I mean, how can I be sitting here in a therapy thing while, this person's on their side, not on the coupleship side? So, okay. My spouse always abandons me when I'm suffering from his behavior. Now, after betrayal, he says to support me, but his actions don't. He is supportive when it doesn't involve him.
Yeah, it sounds like your partner needs some help with shame. And I don't say that pejoratively at all, because how difficult is that to enter an arena where you set off a bomb and to say, I'm here to help? That's incredibly difficult to face that down. And I would say for a lot of the addicts that I work with, that's not something they can do initially, even though they really want to. And so they may say, like, I really want to be here for you. But then when it comes to you being hurt, they don't know what to do with themselves in that. So I think encouraging your partner to get some help with some of their shame, some of their reactivity, some of their empathy, those can all be things that can help so that down the road, your partner would be able to show up for you in the way that you need them to. And that's the thing that surprises a lot of the addicts that I work with, is that at the end of the day, their partner often says, I want you to be the one who can comfort me. I want you to be the one that can hear this. I want you to be the one that I tell you when I'm hurting. But you can't right now. You've shown that to me in a lot of different ways. And that makes me really sad. They're really surprised that their partner still wants them in that way. And that's again, more of that shame talking. Um, so I think it's really helpful. I utilize a lot of, it's called EMDR. It's emotive trauma treatment. I utilize a lot of that with my addicted clients around shame, because it helps with reducing the intensity of really intense emotions and really intense states. Um, and in my experience, that's the kind of work that really helps a person kind of come out of their shame protection into something that can be more empathetic. I think I said this a little earlier. We have to attend to all of the basics that keep us safe and grounded before we can really reach out in compassion to somebody else. And for a lot of addicts that I work with early on, they don't have that. They don't have that platform of safety and stability in many areas of their life, let alone their primary relationship. So there's some work to do before that empathy can really come out.
So like with what you were just sharing, what I heard you say was, like it would be okay as a partner to say, I really want you to be able to support me. I know that you aren't there yet. I have hope and vision for this. So I'm going to go get my support from my friends and peers and whatever. But I want us to be working towards that. Is that something that, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I think it's always helpful to put out there, like, hey, this is what I want, and we're not able to do it right now, or I don't feel like you're in a place where you can give this to me right now. I think those are important, honest conversations for couples to have. Otherwise, this cycle of, I keep telling you I'm going to show up, but I really don't have a car to get there. That keeps happening. And I think it's very helpful long term to say, you know what, I actually don't have a car and I can't get there whenever I want. I'll work on making that a possibility, but it's going to take me some time.
You use great analogies. Thanks. Okay. So continued. This is the main reason for wanting separate couples therapist is his therapist seems to have rescheduling issues, as he also implemented my husband's men's group as well as being his personal therapist. So we're not able to get into couple therapy regularly and are often rescheduled and not regular.
Yeah, again, you're looking at a need that you have in your relationship that it doesn't feel like can be supported the way that it is now. And that's a really important piece of self-advocacy. I would want my clients to tell me if they felt like, hey, I need to see you more often, or I'm not getting what I need to from you. And I've worked with clients in the past who have identified that what they need is not something that I'm giving them. And as we talk about it, there are times where I've been able to say, you're right, that isn't something that I can give you. And I help them find someone who can. So on that again, if you're looking at, we're not seen regularly, I don't feel like our relationship is supported the way that it needs to be, that would be a good reason for seeking another arrangement with therapy. If that was happening individually, I would recommend that too. At the end of the day, you're the one who has the finger on the pulse of your needs, and you have an important say in that.
You don't mention your therapist, so I don't know if you're seeing a supportive therapist for your side. But the other thing that a number of people do is they have conjoint therapy, so that each of their individual therapists is part of the process to do the conjoint couples work, because then everybody's got their person in the room. So that is, another option too. So, oh, good. I am seeing my own therapist too. Well, that, there you go. That's good. So, other questions or comments? I do find the couples piece is challenging, because traditional couples therapists that don't understand addiction and infidelity and sex addiction in particular, like it often is. The messages I get, which doesn't mean it happens all the time, it's just the messages I get are, the couples therapist is going, well, just let them look at porn, or whatever, or look at porn with them, or do whatever. And so it's really not helpful for the partners, and really, and obviously not helpful for the addict as well. But so I think it's extra important that you find qualified support help, for whatever. But I also think, like you said, if it's not meeting your needs, if it feels off in your gut, it's time for something different. I like that, people can talk. Like, I think it's very fair to say to that therapist, this is what I'm feeling like, and see if it changes. But if it doesn't change, or you've already brought it up, then, time to look at other options that will meet your needs. So. And
Definitely.
the other thing I think is, our needs change over time. It's like initially, like when you're in the throes of all of this, and, it's just after discovery and all of that kind of stuff, that's crisis, so, then after you get some period of time, and then, you've worked through a lot of that stuff, then it's more maintenance and helping, get to the next level, which is very different work. And some therapists are really good at this, but not so great at that, or, vice versa. So.
Yeah, I don't think any relationship with any therapist is a lifetime commitment. And there can come times where it may not even be for a negative or uncomfortable reason. It may just be, I think I've gotten what I need to from here. And I think it's a very important, very helpful tool to be armed with as a consumer of mental health services, that you can talk to your therapist at any time about how that relationship feels, and you can advocate for your own needs. You're not just sitting back waiting for a prescription. There may be times where you know more about what you need than your therapist might, and you can bring them into the circle and see if they can help, or you can search elsewhere.
Sorry.
Any other questions? All right, well, I am not seeing any more for today.
Sorry, like I told you before we started that my phone has been ringing nonstop. So I've only gotten 2 phone calls during the webinar, but I was unmuted during the one, so I apologize. But so yeah, I don't see any more questions. We're talking about changing at the end of the month to a Tuesday, alternating Tuesdays for Jons. So I haven't committed to that. I have to have the bandwidth to make sure that I'm not double scheduling it on top of something else. And so I'm looking at options, but I just want to put that in everybody's brains that may be happening. So more information to come, more weeks out, but but looking at that too. So, but as always, thank you so much. So appreciate the information. It's always great for our relationship. So thanks for joining. Thanks for the questions. See you next week. Bye-bye.